Okay. Call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for January 5th of 2023. Looks like we need to change our agenda. It is 10:03 in the morning. Welcome to the first meeting of the year and welcome to our newly elected and sworn in Commissioner, Kit Johnston. And we're going to give you the honors of leading us in the first flag salute for the year.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And you'll just want to make sure your mic is on the green button or green light. Perfect.
Got it.
Okay, item C is new business and item C1 is the election of the chair and vice chair for 2023. And Yamhill County is a bit different maybe from other counties in that we don't have an elected chair position where that person remains the chair the entire time and kind of controls the agenda and sets the agenda for the meetings. We tend to rotate and commissioners have equal access to the agenda. You can add whatever you would like to, discuss whatever you'd like to. So we're a bit more open and on an equal playing field that way. So I rather enjoy that, but that's the process we have to go through every year. First meeting, we go through and elect our new chair and vice chair. So any thoughts on that?
I nominate the existing chair, Commissioner Burschauer, to be chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Can we have discussion now? Because I have looked at the other counties and how they really make that chair position. It's kind of a power position.
Yeah.
And it's not like that here. And I'm grateful for that because we get to do that. We get to nominate different commissioners, and it doesn't necessarily have to go from commissioner to commissioner. I remember when I first got here, Commissioner Springer kept the chair longer than it would typically be in a normal rotation. So it's not unprecedented. I was thinking, and I mentioned this to staff a while ago, I thought about how your tenure here, you were not really able to fully embrace the position because we were remote. I don't even remember, was it April, May that we came back in in-person sessions, or maybe, I don't remember, but it was a good part of the year we weren't here. And I know that there was a sort of political maelstroms that were unfortunate. And I think that that was too bad that your tenure as chair was marred by that. I would be in favor of really asking you if you'd consider doing this position again, kind of like a do-over. And so I appreciate what Commissioner Johnston is proposing, and I guess it's a question of a vote at this point, and then we go from there.
I would be honored to. I would say that I guess my second nomination would be for Kit to be the vice chair, just so that we can sort of help you prepare for potentially being chair next year. If that's something you're comfortable with. Vice chair, has to sort of step in if the chair is not able to make a meeting or something, but for the most part, it's business as usual. So.
Okay.
Yeah, the vice chair would run the meeting if the chair wasn't here. I don't think it ever happened last year.
I don't think so.
But Commissioner Kula was the vice chair, but he'd been here enough time to, he had been chair. So, I mean, it's one of those things where you just on the job training. It's like you get in the saddle and then these meetings can be very, each one of them is different and complex in its own way, but that would be my recommendation.
Okay. So do we have to do separate motions or can we do just chair, vice chair in one?
Yeah, you could do it in one or you could do them separate,
Okay.
either way.
Okay, do you want to amend your motion?
Can I
I don't-
amend it and then nominate
No.
myself to be vice chair?
Let's just do one at a time.
Just to
It's fine.
clarify, it doesn't really require nominations or discussions. It can just be a simple motion.
And there
that
was a
based on-
motion made to have Commissioner Bershauer retain the chair. So if you wanted to act on that motion now, and then you can make a second
just-
motion for the vice chair.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. And I appreciate the honor to do that. And I now will nominate Commissioner Kit Johnston as vice chair. Is there further discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next area of business, new business, is discussion of areas of liaison for 2023. And maybe Ken, if you want to give kind of a background of how we have structured this in the past.
All right, so again, this is something, it's up to the board if you want to take action on this today, or I have some handouts ready that I'll just start going around the table here. And then I'll talk at the same time.
And if anything doesn't make sense, just jump in because sometimes I forget to stop and explain. So.
Okay, so just really briefly, because I know I've met, I'll meet with each of you individually at different times, and we talk about the areas of liaison, what it means, what it doesn't mean, kind of the concept of on what this does. And so this is something that's been in place for quite some time. It actually predates even the county administrator ordinance, but even with the county administrator, there was the board still wants to maintain communications and dialogue and information with the various departments, and realizing how large in scope and varied the various departments are. Historically, it's been divided up into kind of three big categories, and and you have a liaison commissioner that then is available to meet with those specific department areas or areas of liaison, and then come back and provide updates to their fellow commissioners on things that may be happening or coming up for future agenda items or projects that are happening, like an example of some at Public Works or a major initiative there. The liaison for Public Works would come back as part of an update and make sure that the full board's up to date. That's done in conjunction with updates that I also provide, and then also with updates that I ask that department heads also provide directly to the full board. But typically requests for agenda items and things like that, or approval, in some cases, approval of contracts, departments will reach out and include both the county administrator, county council, and the liaison commissioner on those communications. So that way is just kind of a first line of information and discussion before it comes to the full board. So as I said before, there's a long history of how this has been set up. And it really comes down into the big three, what we call historically the big three, which is criminal justice, health and human services. And the third category, it was historically always called public works, but I expanded to land use and public works because it really includes public works, planning, and areas like that. So that's all kind of put together as one, and even includes transit and transportation type matters. So those are how the big three are broken up. What I handed around is essentially it's a fill in the blanks kind of, because I didn't know who was going to be chair or vice chair. So that's why that's blank. You've just taken action on that. So we'll fill that in. And what you'll see in the next pages are what the areas of liaison responsibilities were for last year, for 2022, and how those broke down. I did make some notes. Some of the highlighted areas, like when you look at the first one under Commissioner Bershauer's, the first one I highlighted because typically county council and county admin, that goes to the chair. I didn't know that until a few minutes ago. So that's why that was highlighted. So then that would stay right there with the chair. The other change that's highlighted on here was Parks and Rec Advisory Board. I highlighted that because with the reorganization that we implemented when I moved Parks from Community Corrections, historically Parks had fallen into here because of the liaison to Community Justice. And so it made sense with the reorganization of moving Parks to Public Works that the liaison to Public Works would now be liaison to the Parks Board in Parks, because now organizationally that falls under Public Works. And then the other one, you'll see some other highlights that I've made through here are just kind of question marks that come up from time to time. This list has grown and condensed and grown and condensed, over, several years, where there were a lot of items that were added that aren't, it's good to have it listed to highlight, but when I'm talking about more like community involvement, or an individual commissioner may be on a board, but they're on that board not representing the Board of Commissioners. They were just invited to serve on a certain board or serve in an activity or with a nonprofit or something like that. Then there's question marks. Well, does the rest of the board really need to take action on that? Because is it really an area of liaison? So you'll see some other areas where I've highlighted and raised some questions about whether or not we need to highlight that. I highlighted a good example. Another good example is the Willamette Locks Commission, because on that commission, I don't believe there's an actual seat for a Yamhill County commissioner. It's a governor appointment, and we had previous commissioners that were interested in serving on that and applied to serve on that, and it ended up on the list. But it's not truly this kind of if there's a change in the seat that automatically, if Commissioner Kula was on that committee, it wouldn't necessarily mean that Commissioner Johnston would suddenly, fill that seat.
Right.
It's a different step. They don't really have a request before us to have a representative from the Board of Commissioners. So that one is a question mark as well. And that's why I highlighted that. And then the other one that typically goes to whoever's liaison to Public Works and Transit and Land Use is the MWAC position. And you'll see that later on the agenda. I added that as an agenda item because I know they have meetings that don't necessarily, a lot of these commissions and boards can be very persistent and don't necessarily align with our calendars on how quickly we identify liaisons and who's going to be serving on what committees. But I know that I think they have a meeting. In fact, is it today?
First Thursday of every month.
First Thursday of every month. So MWAC is going to be looking for they reached out for the board to take action. But of course we couldn't take action until this meeting to appoint someone to replace Commissioner Kula. And again, like I said, a lot of times it's whoever's liaison to Public Works. And Transit usually serves on the MWAC committee because of that overlap with the transportation and interactions with Cynthia and Mark and everyone and all the activities they do with ODOT. All right, I did a lot of talking really quickly. Are there any questions about the breakdown and
the Yamhill County Water Task Force, was that not Commissioner Kula's task force?
Well, originally, Commissioner George worked on that, and then I took it over.
Okay.
And then Commissioner Kula had an interest in it, and so he asked if he could, and he took it. Everybody takes it in a different direction.
Okay.
We all focus on certain things. And so that's where it was, but that's not necessarily, where, in other words, it wasn't under any particular heading. So if somebody had an interest in it, Commissioner Johnston, if you had an interest in addressing water, continuing the water task force, just as a side, Association of Oregon Counties has what used to have a special category and a steering committee for water. Now it's rolled into natural resources, and we'll talk about some of those because tomorrow we have steering committee meetings all day, and then on Monday, legislative and board of directors, but we can talk about whatever you'd like to get involved in at AOC. Any commissioner can go to any of the meetings. So we would just get you on the list and you could pick and choose what you wanted to be on and go to those on a regular basis by Zoom if you chose.
Okay,
Yeah,
But-
because the task force get a little bit different because at any point, during a commissioner's term, there could be an initiative, a task force or something that stood up.
Yeah.
I have question. I mean, that's a great question because I'm not sure the status of the water task force, where it's left off. Or the next steps. I know Commissioner Kula was providing updates, but as
Right.
far as I know, there's still the task force in place.
Okay.
For moving forward.
Well, I mean, I would be in favor of sort of how this is generally laid out. I know in the past, we've kind of said that the elected officials in the county should go to the newly elected commissioner, or is it the chair? We did something with that in the past, but
Newly elected commissioner.
right. But I also think that, some of your strengths are really with some of the liaison duties that Commissioner Kula had as well.
I agree.
And the other piece of this is that I was elected as the AOC District 6 chair. So for some of these elected officials like Bradbury and our assessor, they have some initiatives going on in Salem right now that they could use some representation on. So I would be fine keeping these for another year. I guess the only exception would be the Fair Board, because I know, Kit, you're very passionate about that and you have some great ideas and some connections there. So I would love for you to take that.
Yeah, absolutely. I take that.
Okay, even though that's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
areas of life.
It's everybody's favorite.
Yeah, right. So I would suggest moving that over to Kit. I don't know if anything comes with that. Because we're all on the Cove Orchard and we're all on the extension service. Does it make more sense for him to be the chair of the extension service?
Well, some of those other ones, and I didn't necessarily get into the details, but there are some things that historically that the chair, and again, this is just historically what you're seeing here is, typically whoever the vice chair is will be the chair of the contract review board and be the chair of the Cove Orchard Sewer District when we pull those meetings together. The extension service board of directors, transit area board of directors. So when we do convene those groups, it does change. Historically, it's been the vice chair that will then serve as the chair for some of those other smaller committees. And you'll see that throughout this document. It's kind of ebbed and flowed over years with edits. And so, but again, that's completely, I think that's just again, for chairing some of those smaller extension service meetings, Cove Orchard, it's a good introduction to chairing the formal eventually.
The one thing I don't see on here, maybe I'm missing it, is a Newburgh Urban Area Management Commission that I had to resign because Commissioner-elect Johnston was also on that, and we can only have one. And and so we've discussed this at the meeting, at the NUMAC meeting, and Commissioner Johnston. was
Yeah,
on it.
it's on
Is it?
it's on page 4, the very bottom
Very
one.
bottom of,
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
They're the Yamhill urban area and the Newburgh urban area. And so you wanted to have that move.
Yes, because
Yes.
we were both on that.
yep, I think, and Ken Friday's supposed to be working on changing that because we came to that decision at our last NUMAC meeting.
Right.
That you're staying on?
Yes.
And and Christian, I'm kind of looking to you, but there's no issue with Kit coming off the planning commission and then being in the role of liaison to the planning department?
No.
There's nothing, okay, I just want to make sure.
And where's the lipstick voting member? We used to all be voting members, but we're no longer, but.
Typically, the liaison to criminal
Okay.
justice serves
So
as
you're
the
lipstick.
voting member of lipstick.
Oh,
And then I would support, I know you have it on here for Parks and Rec. I would support moving that to Public Works. So that would be Commissioner Johnston.
And then much in the same way, talking about the voting membership, the investment committee is also another one where there's while all three commissioners are members of the investment committee, typically the liaison to the treasurer's office is the voting member of the investment committee. And so that's on there, that's still on there if there's no changes with that.
Going back to AOC, do we, and the ONC,
That would be it fell under me.
have you been? Is that something you want to keep?
I can, it's very difficult to make those meetings because they're down in Roseburg half the time.
Yeah.
So
Any Zoom ability?
typically they don't. do that.
Really?
So,
Okay.
but I can certainly continue to do that. Is that on here? I don't know if I see it.
It's.
It is under
yes.
other government.
Other government.
The other thing is we don't have per se, an economic development liaison because we've never had an economic development department, but Commissioner Bershauer, you were on the SEDCOR board. Is that a
Mhm.
commissioner position?
Well, that's one I'm still researching, trying to understand the history of that on whether the SEDCOR board has a position for Yamhill County Commissioner, which then would fall into this area of where the board would decide under either part of the areas of liaison or in a separate action, you know, who would serve on that. There is under community services and development that we did have a liaison or member liaison for it's under Commissioner Bershauer. The second category for SEDCOR. And I think this was really intended because I know the board has had discussions in the past about who's kind of a liaison to economic development and then the contract that we have with SEDCOR. And I know there's a lot of question marks around the status of, you know, moving forward, whether it's contract or what economic development services are going to look like long term. You know, so one suggestion would be is, you know, because it depends on the board, because I can remember past discussions where all the commissioners said, well, we're all basically heavily involved with economic development and it's a priority for us. And so we don't know if we have one designated liaison. The difficulties that we have for being a liaison to economic development right now is we have some question marks around long-term what we're going to do, because what are you liaison to kind of, you know, if there's no committee, no department, no staff that commissioner is interacting with, then you end up kind of being the point of contact for any type of economic development interests that are coming. And so that could end up being kind of a workload issue or question marks around process and what that looks like. That might be something that we just want to strike or highlight for a discussion later once some decisions are made around long-term plans for economic development and what that looks like, and then determine whether or not, depending on the long-term plans, to implement a liaison, area liaison on that. I don't know.
The only thing I'm thinking about is we have a new commissioner and we also have a sort of a new initiative or a new concept about what economic development is going to look like. And I would hate to throw that his way and say, okay, now we're gonna have a new commissioner try to figure this out. That's why I would recommend that Chair Burschauer be the point person right now until we can tie up some loose ends.
Yep.
Because you've been involved with SEDCOR and sort of the quasi liaison to economic development such as it is. So we would need to talk about so many of the different elements like EDAC and
Right.
membership and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we still have a contract with Sedcor,
Mhm.
so moving forward, I think it's fine to keep that there, but I do think that once we have our discussions about next steps and how we want to structure economic development, that we can shift that if we need to. That's totally fine. Okay. Okay, so,
Yeah, so as far as next steps go, I mean, what I'd like to do is, unless there's further questions or you'd like additional time to review this, but I could I've been taking notes with these adjustments. I could get this ready to go and I could bring it forward for formal adoption for next week. But essentially, it's kind of noted, you could still proceed under these areas. We'll just have to do the formality of adopting it next Thursday. It'll just give
Okay.
me a chance. That way you're acting on a clean document and I'm not typing up here and adding to the record
Okay,
if the board is okay with that.
sounds good. Thank you for putting this together. It does change over the years.
It does.
does that satisfy MWAC's timeline?
Well, MWAC, because knowing if it sounds like there's consensus that Kit's going to be the liaison
Yep.
to Public Works and Transit. So when we get to the agenda item under other business, I do have the MWAC appointment there, and
We'll just do
then
that.
the
Okay.
board could take action at that time to appoint Kit.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Any
Okay.
further discussion on that or concerns? Okey dokey. Item D is our calendar session. Anything to add to the joint calendar?
I just wanted to add that there are steering committee meetings tomorrow. It's governance and health and human services. And as I said, those are open to everybody. So if anybody jumps on, we would have them notice. And then we have legislative, which a lot of people go to. So
Mhm.
Monday's legislative and board of directors.
And for our new commissioner, the calendaring, what we do is we have a joint weekly calendar that we post to the website. And this is in case so we can document any functions next week that two or all of the board may be attending, to make sure that if that it's noticed and it's on, and we use that calendar to kind of document who's attending what session. But knowing how busy your calendars are and things, this is really intended to kind of capture those, like if there's a dinner next week for the fair board or something like that, and two or all of you are going to attend that function, that we have that on the calendar. So then that way, the press decides to attend, we have to notice anything where a majority of the board is attending.
Okay, so like the AOC meeting, if I went to that, that would be included in that? or-
We typically put all the AOC
Mhm.
functions on the joint calendar. So Monday, they've changed the format, so
Mhm.
it's made it a little more challenging for us as far as scheduling, because it used to be AOC day, and where all the subcommittees and all the
Mhm.
legislative and board of directors used to all to happen in one day, but that's been broken out. But we get the communications and we'll make sure we update the calendar, because knowing that you may want to sign in and join, but I also believe they notice those as well.
The other thing is Commissioner Johnston on any kind of communications that are coming from AOC?
Yes.
You are?
Yep,
Okay.
I've received them.
They will be numerous. So like the CERT banquet. So I think Carolina had that invitation to us, but that's next Saturday on the 14th. So we might, all three of us.
I
perhaps.
won't make that one. I can already tell you that.
I'll be there.
So something like that would be, even though we're not discussing
Okay.
policy or anything, we're all there, so. Okay. That brings us to item E, which is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. We did receive one written public comment, if everyone's seen that. But if there is public comment in the audience or virtually online, please raise your hand and we will have you come on. Okay, hearing none. Item F is our department updates. We have nothing today. Item G, work session, nothing on our work session today. Item H is our consent agenda. There's nothing there. Item I, old business. I1 is consideration of approval of a sealed bid in the amount of $15,250 for tax lot number R5926004000, continued from December 22nd, 2022. And Commissioner Johnston, we discussed this at our very last meeting, which was on the 22nd. And there was concern about the price that was submitted, the bid that was submitted, and how low it was in relation to the real market value of the property, which is somewhere in the range of $253,000. It's just over 4 acres of rural, technically buildable land. And so it's probably worth somewhere in the range of 125 to 150,000. However, we have since heard from Jody, County Council, that there is no legal access technically to the property. So it's kind of an island.
It's, yeah, the access that's there is sort of across the neighbor's property.
Right.
But as you know, if you have parcels that otherwise don't have a legal access, you can apply for it.
Right.
And the courts, if it gets to that point, if you can't reach agreement with the adjacent property owner, would likely grant someone a prescriptive easement so that there is access.
Right.
Nature abhors a vacuum, just like nature
Sure.
abhors these landlocked properties that you can't get to. But yes, I do believe the current access historically has been across the adjacent property, who, as I'll remind the board, is also the person who submitted the bid,
Mhm.
is the neighbor.
And it's at a, you said it's in a bit of a ravine.
I haven't been there
Okay.
personally, but I understand it's a fairly remote
Yeah,
property off of Ebo Road.
I talked to Jason this morning. He gave me a little background on it.
Okay.
And there is a stream that you have to cross to get to this property from the neighbor's property.
Hmm.
So there is
And-
some form of a ravine there.
Yeah. And according to Jody, some significant levels of cleanup because we,
Yeah, I don't think there's any environmental cleanup, but it appears that there's some items that have been left, some solid waste, an old boat, I believe.
Mhm.
So yeah, whoever buys the property would buy it with those items on the property.
Mhm.
The thing that, and when you look at the real market value and then look at buildable lot in the area and what our assessor is telling us it's worth, on paper, it looks like that's a real low ball offer.
Mhm.
But then when you look at all the mitigating circumstances and what this means to the county, we did auction it off. We did have a.
We did hold an auction. It was on the
Mhm.
list. We did not receive any bids on the property at the public auction.
Right, so this is the neighbor who's got interest, has interest in it, has had interest in it in the
Correct.
past. And when you talk about the dwelling is in really poor condition, and then you've got solid waste issues, no access issues. It looks like there are significant liabilities to someone else coming in and giving a full price offer on this. So I've talked about this at length with a counselor. And she's explained some of the reasons why it might be a good idea to accept this
Mhm.
bid.
Commissioner Johnston, any further questions?
I do.
Okay.
So the biggest thing that I would want to know would be if somebody has personally talked to all the surrounding property owners that have access to that property. There's at least 3 from the homework I did this morning that I don't believe have been contacted or as anybody spoke to personally. They may have been mailed something, or it may have been posted on the website, but they may not have known that it was for sale. One of them's L&C Tree out of Portland. I'm assuming it's a timber company.
Mm.
They have access to that property. There's a very small piece. It's hard to tell, but it looks like it might be owned by Newt Strom. I'm getting most of this information from Jason, or the surveyor, because he made some notes when he went out there to survey it. And he's had contact with McKinley, and they were the ones that wrote the offer. And he's also talked to Don Seats, because he had to go onto Don's property to get to, then I think it goes through McKinley's property, and then you get to our property. But there's still L&C tree in this Newt Strom. So I guess I'd want to just make sure that everybody's aware that the property is up for sale before we.
Yeah, and I think that was an option that Jody had put forward as, if that could be a next step, that we decide to sort of notify a radius of people.
Right.
And I'm confirming, we normally do send out notices to neighbors before we sell these properties, and I'm going to confirm with Noelle to see if we've already done that. And you referred to the fact that they may have received something in writing, but haven't been contacted personally post auction to see if they still have.
I mean, if it's
interest
going,
or if they're just
some giant corporation in Portland, it just goes in the trash or doesn't get to the right person. It's worth a phone call.
Sure. Well, I know we've had some folks who lived along the proposed trail who said we never got any notification, even though we did it pro forma by the book and sent everything out to who we had addresses for.
Right.
There were those people who said never got it. So that's a good point.
And it could be a property address versus an office address or place of business that they're,
Right.
The only other question I had was it buildable, which you answered that. So, and you kind of answered the question of, is it possible to get an easement?
It should be. Yeah. I mean, I'm not aware of any situation where when someone has owned a piece of landlocked property that they weren't either able to negotiate access with an adjacent property owner or have the court order that access be made available. So, I mean, that's the worst case scenario, right? Is going to the court and having a court order that they be granted a prescriptive easement. So I believe someone could get access if they can't otherwise come to an agreement with the neighbor.
Okay.
So I guess if we are going to open it up to increase notification of, some radius around the property, my next issue would be just fairness, because obviously this sealed bid has now been made public. The other neighbors know what it is. So what then would occur?
So this is similar to some of the private property sales that we've handled in the past. If you recall, property that's valued at less than $15,000 doesn't first have to go to auction. And those are the scenarios that I'm thinking about where we have sent notice to each of the adjacent neighbors, seen if there was any interest, and then we've accepted bids from those adjacent neighbors. In those situations where we have more than one bid, we've sort of managed a sort of bidding process, right? Where we'll notify, hey, neighbor A has bid X. That's higher than your previous bid. Would you like to bid higher? And then we sort of see where that goes. So I would
With a
suggest-
set time frame for that, or?
I don't know that we've ever set like a set time frame, but we certainly could. Usually that process has resolved itself in a matter of hours or
Or
days.
somebody says.
Generally,
no,
you get to the
then-
point where someone's like,
Right.
look, here's my cap.
Mhm.
If they offer more, then I'm out.
Okay.
And that's happened before. And so that would be a way to sort of ensure that if this bid is well, if we expand the notice, we can reach out, and then if there is another entity that's interested. And in the meantime, anyone else out there could submit a bid as well. It's not like we're
Right.
going to limit it to the adjacent property owners, but if we notified them directly, if we got another bid, then we could proceed similarly, right? Let the existing bidder know that, hey, we've gotten a higher bid. We could put an end date to it. We could ask them both to submit sealed bids. I think the trick with the sealed bids is then it makes it harder to sort of have that open communication during the bidding process. So I might suggest that we just follow the process we've used before, which is, Noelle in our office has been in communication with the folks who are interested in bidding and kept them both informed and allowed them to bid as long as they're interested. And then once we have a high bid, we could bring that back to the board, and then the board can act on that.
Okay, so I guess if that's an option, then what's the radius? You know, what do we?
I mean, if you wanted to set it over for another week, we could try and reach out to the other property owners and see if there's any other interest.
Okay.
And then if
So
there
you're
is-
just thinking adjacent.
Yep, I'm thinking at the
Surrounding.
bare minimum, just the adjacent,
Okay.
because that ideally, without having to go through the headache of trying to get an easement to the property,
Yeah.
they have access.
Right.
And so at the bare minimum, at least make sure those people know. If they don't, then we can make a decision after that. It's
Okay.
kind of my train of thought.
And we would also include the current bidders
Right.
on that additional notice as well.
So would this also include opening it up generally and putting a notice on the website or something?
I mean, technically, it's already
Mhm.
open.
It's
It's
still
already
open, it's still
Yeah, I
considered
mean, the
open.
board hasn't accepted
Yeah.
a bid yet. I don't know that it still appears on the available properties list. But until the board accepts a bid, I think it's still available. We didn't put, I'll confirm this with Noelle, but.
Hey.
I don't.
We're just talking about you.
Okay, so yeah, Noelle confirmed that we have sent notices out, but we can follow up with some additional communication.
Our assessor just appeared.
Yes, Derek, were you wanting to weigh in on this item? Okay,
Come on in.
sounds good.
Do that. Listening from afar.
Not that far.
Welcome, Commissioner Johnson.
Howdy.
And thank you. No, I was watching you guys on the YouTube, and I was hearing some things that I thought we should clarify before a decision ever goes forward. And one of the things I looked into on this particular property was from an aerial imagery standpoint and a tax lot overlay, does this have ingress egress issues? And I did not see them. What I saw was a tax lot that had direct access to a county road.
Oh,
And
Okay.
it's not a orphaned or abandoned lot as described. Those are actually very rare. So one of the things I looked at too, in terms of real market value, was from the aerial imagery, the improvements look to be like they should just be raised and be done.
Right.
So if we take the component of the real market value that we have at 230 or something like that, take all the improvement value off and just say it's a lost cause, then you're down to just vacant land value. And there could be some cost to cure, remove a boat, fix a
Yeah.
septic. I don't know.
Yeah.
We haven't been there in a long time, but vacant land with no improvements, with a buildable designation.
Yeah.
In that area, proximity is at $125,000-$150,000. This one kind of has a flag lot appeal to it, so it's a little bit behind, maybe not right on the road. But I think before, and if this hasn't been done, maybe this is what's prudent, is to get a designation from planning as to verify that it's buildable. From what we can see, it is, but we're not the planning department.
Okay.
And then two, is there an ingress egress issue? Because I don't see that from an aerial view of this particular property. It looks to be a cutout with a sliver that goes
Mhm.
directly to the road, adjacent to the property owner that I can see is making the bid for the property. The other ones that are around it don't look to be developed. It looks to be across the street or the other developed lots in terms of homes. So the idea, Commissioner Johnson, of reaching out to all the touching properties. The other ones may have interest is to expand their current vacant land holdings to add 4 acres. So.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to throw in there as I was hearing some, I didn't want any comments that I had made to be deemed definitive in terms of planning.
Okay.
Or ingress and egress. I see that just from aerial imagery and what we have in our data.
Okay,
okay.
yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
There we go, right? Okay, any other
Thank
questions
you.
for me?
Appreciate you.
I don't think so.
Checking in.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Those are all things that could be looked into. Historically, we haven't taken those extra steps. We've left that up to the
sure.
individual entities who are interested in bidding the
Mhm.
property to resolve all of those property related questions. Okay, if I'm interested in buying this foreclosed piece of property, what is my access? Is it buildable? Not to say that we can't do that work and try to answer some of those questions ourselves. Historically, we haven't done that on a property by property basis.
Because what we state is that these properties are sold as is and it's up. to
Completely
the-
as is, whereas
to
we
do the
make
due
no disclaimers,
diligence.
we sell them under a quitclaim deed.
Right, okay.
Well, and I'm also
See, now-
thinking just the challenges if we're making determinations on whether or not it's buildable or not, and potentially it could be coming before the board on a land use decision down the road, I'm just thinking of another reason why we probably.
But can't we just get a letter from planning that says, yes, this is buildable, and then we're okay?
Mm,
As far as to,
We can look into that.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's
we
an
own the
existing
property.
I'm just,
there.
my
home's
whole
already
point
there.
to this is this property, you have two numbers that you're working with. One is from the assessor, one is from an offer that was made, and we're trying to make it more valuable. That's what I'm trying to do.
And again, that's not something that the board has historically done. We
Right.
haven't really been that, the board hasn't been concerned in trying to make tax foreclosed properties more valuable to return greater amount of money to the county.
Right.
Not to say that that's.
No, and I'm
a
not saying that I'm
policy
gonna
choice.
go,
And that's totally
spend
fine.
300 grand to try to make this
Yeah.
sell for 200. I'm not.
Where we've
just-
generally in the
phone
past set the
calls.
minimum bids is to make sure that we're covering the back taxes.
Right.
And beyond that, we haven't really invested, the board hasn't invested additional time, but we certainly can. And that's an option. If the board chooses to do that, we can certainly look into that and see if we can get some sort of verification from the planning department.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to know the answer to the access question because
I was just,
Jody was pretty clear. There's no known legal access, but maybe we just haven't.
and the
looked
way
into
I
it
was,
or-
my aerial view, I just have a hunting app that I'm looking at and it shows property owners and there's different property owners all the way around it. So
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe we need to make a
Welcome-
trip after
welcome
that.
aboard. We
Yeah,
have
I want to
we
see the
have
map
some
you're looking
idea.
at, so
You'll get access to it.
we'll come right on down.
So yeah, those two things and not speaking for planning, but from an appraisal standpoint, when we see an existing dwelling already there, then that lends itself to be buildable.
Right.
Obviously, it's there. So whether they tear that down, remodel it, whether that's permitting issues, I don't know any of that.
Yeah.
But the dollars we do collect through this foreclosure process do go into the general distribution. So to the extent that we can not spend extra dollars, but get the real market value or close to it, that seems prudent to me.
Right.
Rather than a liquidation offer to a neighbor that's going to have another buildable lot, is my opinion.
I agree.
So Jody's not here to answer this question, why she deems it as no known legal access.
Yeah, her and I were conversing and we both came to the opinion that should be looked into.
When you discuss this with Jason, did he have any?
He believes
input
it's
on that?
landlocked.
Oh, yeah, open question, it sounds like.
So,
Be glad to go out there and take photos and do an inspection from the appraisal standpoint, if that helps make a decision at all. We're doing rural reappraisals right now anyway, so it wouldn't be a heavy lift to send someone and just get photos and whatever of that property.
Jason warned me, if you guys do go out there, just go talk to him first, because he says, make sure you're waving your arms and announcing yourself as you walk.
Common practice in that area.
Onto the property.
We have zones in the county.
Yeah.
Anyway, some things to think about, but yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
appreciate that.
Thanks, Derek.
Okay, so at the very least, I'm gonna suggest that we move this to next week.
Okay.
I know Jody's back.
And we can try and
In the
have some
meantime.
additional discussions with Jason and if the board would like, as Derek offered, have them go out and do some additional assessment and
Yeah.
review of the property. All of that's available.
Not that I'm gonna be able to determine whether it's landlocked or not from Derek's map, but I'd like to see that map too.
The map,
See how he's looking at it to determine that it possibly isn't.
I know, because what we looked at, it appears like it is landlocked.
And it looks like the road it borders onto is a state highway. So there may be, if it is, as he suggested, if it touches the highway, getting access would be something they would need to resolve with the state.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Right.
we will, we'll move that to next week.
Is that something we can address all those issues in a week?
We can certainly try.
Or at least, I mean,
I
have
don't
an
mind putting
update.
in-
I'm
Sure.
not expecting it to be resolved, just touch base and have
Yeah.
an update.
We can certainly try. would you like to have Derek go out and have his staff go out and take another look at the property?
I don't,
Well-
the biggest thing from Jason has already been out there. He says the house is nothing. It is on the ground, dangerous, don't go around it. So I think it becomes a point of somebody just verifying that it's a buildable lot or acreage
And the access.
and access. And Jason thought that if us as the county had to get access road to the property through the stream, that we might have more hurdles than if it was just a private property owner also.
Well, that's one of the reasons why it went for such a small amount, is because when you look at all of we had the cleanup and,
Right.
and all of that.
But now all of a sudden, if we do have access to it, so I don't know.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Derek offered, he said that improvements haven't been done in over 10 years, so I just didn't want to say, yeah, sure, without talking about what that would entail or having agreement on that.
So at this
Um,
point, we'll try and get confirmation whether or not it's buildable lot, and then see if we can get answers to the access question. And then see if we can answer those questions, maybe if we can, put it back on the agenda for next week, and then in the meantime, we'll reach out to the
Okay.
adjacent property owners as well.
Okay. Item I2 is approval of the appointments of Stephen J. Wick and Craig Brown to the Yamhill County Planning Commission to serve the remaining terms of positions vacated by Marjorie Erie and Kit Johnston. Wick term to expire August 1st, 2025, and Brown term to expire August 1st, 2024. This is continued from December 22nd, 2022. And commissioners, I just have spoken to a few people that had concerns about the fact that this process wasn't really opened up to the public like we would normally do for a planning commission appointment. And that a few people who wanted to and intended to apply didn't get the opportunity to. And then I also spoke with a planning commission current member who said that they were pretty surprised that these just sort of came forward without any process that they were used to. So my suggestion would be that we open up these two positions to the public again and just sort of communicate that they're open and then we're taking applications for them, maybe for another 2 weeks. I'm not sure what the previous process was, but
It was not very well announced, so I don't know.
yeah,
Because Marjorie's spot was vacant for
It's been open
6
long
months
time.
at least.
yeah. So
And then
whatever that
other crazy guy,
process
he just
is.
got off there. They kicked him off.
Yeah.
Last week.
Whatever that process is, I would say for a minimum of 2 weeks, maybe a month, just keep it open and advertise that we have these positions open, that's so that we're notifying the public that there's an opportunity there.
I'll connect with Ken Friday and remind because we do have a policy. So for filling of vacancies on boards and commissions. So I'll revisit that with Ken and we'll open it for the prescribed time and then come back. Anybody, including the folks that were brought forward, will still be in the pool for consideration. We'll just open it up and accept applications up to a deadline, and then Ken will be able to come back with those recommendations at a later date.
Yeah, sounds good. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, because I think the last time there was pretty extensive interviews by Zoom.
Yeah.
I watched those and those were really lengthy. And I believe they hung on to some of those applicants for future
Mhm.
placements. So I don't know if those were considered and part of this.
Yeah.
They were not,
They were not. Okay.
not
Okay.
far as the commissioners knew of anyway,
Okay.
planning commissioners.
Okay, so we will follow up with Ken Friday on that. And that brings us to item J, which is other business. Item J1 is discussion of membership and renewal invoice for Association of Oregon Counties, or AOC. And we received the invoice for general fund dues and our membership. It's significantly higher.
Yeah, I received the renewal invoice. Historically, there's always been requests that I bring that renewal invoice before the board instead of just processing the invoice. So I put it on the agenda to bring it for the board for discussion, but yes, that's our dues invoice for dues for the calendar year.
Chair, over the years, I mean, there's been a significant increase in the dues and it's kind of sticker shock to take a look at that. I know the discussions in the past have been around whether or not, in fact, a lot of counties are having discussions about whether or not AOC represents their interests because they're pretty much dominated by the larger metropolitan counties in terms of the dues they pay and some of the representation. So there's been a lot of talk about various subgroups and secessions in AOC, but I think at this point, this is what we have to work with. The other concern is that because we have to be a member of AOC to access CIS insurance, we pretty much don't have a choice. So kind of one way to look at this is as this is part of our insurance premium.
Yes, and sort of coming into this as a fairly new commissioner, it was surprising to hear the conversation that happened, what was that, last November, between other commissioners and discussion around AOC dues and why they went up by 7.5% for this year. So, there was sort of a begrudging, acceptance of the fact that because of cost of living and all these other things that go into it, that this was necessary, but it'll be interesting to see how the discussion goes at the end of this year.
So is the biggest factor with AOC, the insurance that comes with it?
It's a major consideration for us. Yeah, for CIS.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the county's participation in the dues that it covers, I mean, it also covers a lot of the affiliate organizations as well, even though we have separate membership dues for the affiliates in a lot of cases, but this is for the county to participate in AOC and just like both commissioners said, that because city county insurance, the insurance pool that we belong to, came out of a AOC and League of Oregon Cities agreement. Because again, looking for insurance for tough to insure organizations. And so then you have this pool. And so as a requirement, it's part of the CIS coverage requirement. In order for us to be an active member in CIS, we have to be current with AOC dues.
But the AOC dues are reflected in an insurance policy and that's why it keeps going up also, or no?
No,
Oh,
No.
okay.
it's complete. It's
So
related.
there's
but
an insurance
unrelated.
policy dollar figure that we're paying for on top of the AOC dues.
Oh, yes. big one.
Oh, yeah.
A big number.
Lots more zeros.
Because unfortunately, with the options that we're looking at, if we were to not continue with AOC and not continue with CIS, that's a much larger discussion that's going to require, going self-insured, which, we've been doing research on and looking at, but it's still a pretty significant hill to climb as far as the funding requirements for going self-insured. We're getting close size wise to where, because you can see a lot of the much larger counties are self-insured. And then as you start going by size and budget, then you start getting in, we're in that next tier that we're close, but not quite there because it's pretty substantial what we would have to both have budgeted, the umbrella coverage, the staff, a lot of the things that go into being self-insured. So it's a pretty heavy lift. So it is part of one of the things that if we're not members of AOC, then our membership in CIS is in jeopardy. So
Got
it's
it.
kind of related, but they're two different checks that we're writing.
And I think we may be having that discussion a little sooner than we had anticipated with the passage, which measure 110. What was the healthcare measure? on the ballot in November. Can't
Oh,
remember.
The universal healthcare.
Universal
Yeah.
healthcare, yeah. So there's a lot of legal implications for that I think are gonna force the conversation a bit sooner.
With AOC, or are you thinking that might come through CIS?
It just through insurance pools that purchase healthcare on a larger market, basically. So,
Yeah, and just to clarify, the CIS doesn't provide our healthcare benefit insurance. We work with a separate broker on that. We're actually self-insured for our dental. The CIS provides work, liability, property insurance, crime insurance,
Cyber.
cyber,
yeah.
all of that, that's that whole portfolio of insurance coverages that we have there.
Yeah.
And then we have a couple of excess policies as well,
Correct.
excess coverage policies outside of CIS.
Yeah, for environmental. The
They're
landfills.
our tort claim insurer. So
Yes.
All our general liability.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty significant.
It's a limited
Yes.
ethics coverage too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I will move approval of paying the AOC 2023 renewal invoice. Is there further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Okay, item J2. Consideration of selecting and appointing a Yamhill County Board of Commissioner representative to the Mid-Willamette Valley Area Commission on Transportation, or MWAC, to serve the remainder of former Commissioner Kula's term through December 31st of 2023. And based on our previous discussion, I will nominate and move approval of appointing Commissioner Kit Johnston to MWAC. Is there further discussion?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank
Item J3, consideration of approval of the local mental health authority, local public health authority, and coordinated care organization agreement between Yamhill County and Yamhill County Care Organization, retroactive to January 1st, 2023. Replacing the agreement approved under Board Order 22-46.
Chair, a couple of comments I want to make. I will be moving approval of this, but I do have some comments I want to make for the record. We do a community health assessment, or what's fondly called a CHA, every 5 years. And it's a pretty extensive look into health and well-being of our community members. What I've seen in this last iteration of a very thick packet and a lot of work that went into it by staff is that it's becoming increasingly more politically inflammatory. And a lot of the information that's in here is really more ideological and less pointed towards what we as a county can do to improve the health and well-being of our families. And I just point out there is a significant amount of information in here cited from the Multnomah County Office of Diversity and Equity. And I don't want to be in a position of accepting that Yamhill County will take marching orders and look at templates for any policy work that Multnomah County does. It's an entirely different county with different leadership, with a different political persuasion. And I think that here in Yamhill County, we have demonstrated an incredibly cohesive and collaborative partnership with our nonprofits and our health and human services, public health. And I think we do a really good job. I think we can all do a better job, but I think that what we're seeing here is we are paying for a lot of political jargon in disparaging systems and people in this work. So while I think there's some good information in it, I think we need to be aware of the stuff that's coming across our desks, which coming from the state or the federal government really leans more toward political ideology and less toward what can we do to improve systems. Because I can tell you in almost 9 years being here, that when someone comes to a commissioner or a department head or a county department looking for help or a resource, I think we do a really good job of being responsive and helpful. I'd love to see us be able to offer more streamlined navigation of some of our systems for our most vulnerable families. And that's what I think is my frustration, is sometimes we have analysis paralysis. We will study something. We will have a committee, we'll have a subcommittee, a task force, a focus group, and then pay for consultants. And I think government does that because we're not paying the bills. The taxpayers are. So while we are given marching orders and requirements on trainings and different things we have to do to comply, I think we need to be aware of some of the stuff that we're seeing. So I would move approval.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Starrett, and good points. It's always good to keep an eye and go through all of the things that come in front of us. Any further discussion? Okay, Commissioner Starrett moves approval of item J3. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you, motion passes. Item J4 is consideration of approval of agreement between Yamaha County and Oregon Health Authority Board Order 20-406 for the Nurse Family Partnership Program in the amount of $426,400, retroactive to September 30th of 2022 through December 31st of 2023.
Chair, I would move approval. And I think this is an example of one of those programs that really does have a return on investment, and they show the receipts.
Mhm.
Got to have families that stick with it and have some accountability. And I think it's been a successful program, and I would say it's worthy of continuing. So I would move approval.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Starr moves approval. Moves approval. Is there further discussion or questions? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. J5 is consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to agreement number 55198 between Yamaha County and Lane County for food handlers training and testing revenue sharing retroactive to January 1st, 2023 and December 31st of 2024.
Chair, I move approval.
Is there further discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. J6, consideration of a letter in support of legislative concept 1479. And this is something that I added. If you need to see a copy of the letter, we've got one rotating around here. But this was a request of our district attorney, Brad Berry, to support the legislative concept, potentially future bill, to add DAs and DDAs into the police and fire PERS designation. So they are one of a few public safety classifications that are not included in the police and fire PERS designation. And so his request was to have us weigh in and support, and really the goal is to provide a further benefit for individuals who go into that line of work, because it is extremely traumatic and stressful. If you think about when a crime is committed, it's not just law enforcement that shows up, it's our DA's office that shows up with them. So, this is a tool in the toolbox to help with recruitment, to help with just overall morale of our department. And obviously he's been having some trouble filling some of those positions. So he did ask us individually to weigh in. I submitted my own individual testimony. I believe Commissioner Starrett did as well. But I also wanted to bring it in front of the board just to make sure that if we wanted the opportunity to weigh in, we could. So there's a letter going around. We are going to edit it a little bit because of some of the wording in there wasn't quite clear about who is considered police and fire in the designation. And so we will edit that too. I think Christian has the copy of that was edited, but
Yeah, Ken and I were chatting about this yesterday afternoon. Historically, the county has also included in the public safety sort of employee category our juvenile detention workers, who are also under the statute strike prohibited, but are not currently PERS, police and fire. So what I had discussed with the chair was changing the last paragraph so that it would read adding DAs and DDAs to the police, fire, PERS category could go a long way in aiding retention efforts, and then it would continue on with the balance of the remainder of the paragraph and remove the phrase at the start of that paragraph that said that currently DAs and DDAs are the only strike prohibited public safety employees not included in the category, because again, through our historical reading of that, the juvenile detention workers are also not included. So
There is some immediacy to this, which is why our DA asked us to send letters individually, because I believe that the AOC Public Safety Committee is going to be
Tomorrow.
discussing. Is it today? Or
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow, so that they would have these to discuss. And the other thing is the DA did mention that this adds, they would have to work an additional 5 years for this benefit. So, and I think when you look at the list of those who are considered eligible, there are a lot of ancillary positions
Right.
like OLCC. So this makes sense.
But just to clarify, the only existing positions that we have within the county that are qualified as police and fire for PERS would be the sheriff's office deputies and adult parole and probation are the only two categories that are eligible for the police and fire benefit. And the other part is I just want to make sure for the interests of this, and I really have no opinion one way or another, but this will, if approved, will result in a budgetary impact, down the road, if that was going to happen. Keeping in mind that the police and fire benefit and the percentage of contributions that we make for those employees who fall into that category are higher than, they're essentially equivalent to like a tier 2 category. I don't have the percentages right in front of me, and I can't give you actual budgetary impacts because there's a lot of variables depending on the legislation when it's implemented, and it's based on a percentage of salary and those contribution rates. So there's a whole mathematical exercise that has to be done. And I just, want to be sure the board's aware that, this would have a budgetary impact, because I think most employees, we've seen a shift. You may recall when we were talking about budget instructions and some of those, that we've been going through a shift where we have more and more employees that are actually in what I'm going to call tier 3, but it's OPSER, which is that third category, which the contribution rates look completely different than what you see for tier 1 and tier 2. We have almost no tier 1 employees in most, in a smaller percentage of tier 2, but those contribution rates start to look a little bit different. It has a different retirement package. It's an earlier retirement. So there are some implications with this, but again, I'm just want to make sure the board's aware of that there is a potential budget implication.
That is why when DA reached out to me, I initially said, no, I'm not going to write a letter of support, because first of all, the system itself is kind of on shaky ground, and I think it's a very expensive program, and it's not funded. And then what it would do to the county. So the DA understood that, and we had further discussions. And I think what did it for me was looking at all of the other the other people that fit into that category who are covered, and the retention and the recruitment piece, which is
Right.
a problem.
Yeah, having an OLCC
Yeah.
inspector be considered, police and fire, just, I don't know how that happened, but that doesn't make any sense.
No.
But I think in general, and just to remind everybody, we're not setting the policy. We're just, that's up to the legislature.
Right.
So however it comes out, it comes out. But I go back to my personal feeling about PERS, which is it should be, and it was designed for frontline public employees, right? That was the purpose. I don't believe politicians should be in it. I have some very strong views about that. But in my mind, this is who PERS and that type of benefit was designed for. So it's kind of an easy sell for me, despite the fact that the system at large is questionable, so. Any thoughts? Questions? No? Okay. So I will move approval of the amended letter to make sure that we're factually accurate. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Okay, great, thank you. And I did let them know, the DA know that we would send that over to him at some point this afternoon so they can have that for their packet for tomorrow. Item J7 is consideration of a letter to be submitted to the Oregon Department of Transportation or ODOT opposing new tolling on I-5 and I-205. So commissioners, this is something I also added. The letter is here if you'd like to see it. But, this is something that we have weighed in on last year when the tolling director, Garrett Pryor, came in front of our board to give an overview of the tolling program and what would go into that. We did sort of issue a statement that said we had concern over this. And now ODOT is going through what they call a scoping process. So they are asking for public testimony for the quote unquote scope of what their study should entail. And so that testimony is due tomorrow. So I would like to weigh in again. My letter is very strongly worded in the sense that it sort of reiterates our opposition to tolling on freeways that Oregonians have already paid for. I don't think I need to go into the impact to family budgets. We had him testify that the tolls on I-205 would be upwards of $8 a day, and that's not even including I-5, and they will have a tolling station at the Boone Bridge on I-5 as well. So the impact to our small businesses, our residents who have to commute outside of the county is going to be significant. I also have other concerns that they need federal approval in order to implement tolls, and they do not have federal approval at this point. So they are going through these exercises and spending taxpayer money without having approval to do so. The I-5 replacement bridge, which is really what the tolls are designed to help fund, has now been projected anywhere from $5 billion to $7.5 billion to pay for the replacement of that bridge, and the bulk of the cost is light rail, most of which our residents will probably never use, and yet we're paying tolls to pay for that. And they just applied for a grant for almost $1 billion from the federal government to help pay for the cost of the I-5 bridge, and they didn't receive the grant. So they are I was around for the Columbia River crossing boondoggle. I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars were wasted on that failed project. I see this having the same warning signs again, but I think that we do have a responsibility to protect the folks who live here who have to commute. I've also been in discussion with Clackamas County commissioners who are very aggressively opposing this and doing what they can to stop the new tolling. So with that in mind, I wanted to make sure that if we want to weigh in by tomorrow, we have, actually it's today, excuse me, it's today by 5 o'clock. So if we want to weigh in and submit testimony, that we have something that we can approve and submit.
And the other thing I would add, Chair, is when Mr. Pryor was here, we asked the question, I believe you asked the question regarding what happens to the neighborhood, the side streets, when people try to avoid the tolls. And his response was, we'll figure it out. And I don't think that's a good enough answer. And it sort of speaks to some of the unintended consequences, which we really never look at until it's too late. So I would think this letter is much appreciated and needed.
Any thoughts or
I do.
comments or?
And I remember sitting in on the meeting in the audience, listening to ODOT, explain the tolling. And I remember a couple weeks later, headed up I-5 and there was a fender bender, and I'm on the Washington side now. And I video recorded probably for at least 3 minutes of all of the semis with all the freight in them.
Mhm.
So this goes beyond an individual basis with somebody driving across and getting told. This also gets put onto freight, which affects everybody,
Oh, absolutely.
probably to a little bit lesser of a monetary extent, but it's there and it's a real number too. So.
And we also talked to him about how we aren't necessarily opposed to a toll road so long as there is an immediate and direct benefit,
Mhm.
right? If there's a choice to take a road that is not tolled, then perhaps you have to sit in traffic, or you pay a $3 toll and you take an expressway that actually has a direct
Mhm.
benefit. Nothing wrong with that, but that's not what this is designed to do. So I'm very concerned about the impact to our residents and just residents in the metro area. I don't think most people have any clue what's coming, and it's bad policy. And I think that we need to keep them, stay in the conversation and keep them accountable. So with that, I will move approval of item J7. Is there further discussion?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. That brings us to item K, which is our public hearings. We have nothing today for public hearings. And item L is announcements. Commissioners, any announcements? Other than to congratulate our newly elected and sworn in officials, Commissioner Kit Johnston, our new or existing, but newly sworn in county clerk, Carrie Hinton, and then of course the sheriff, Tim Svensson, who was also sworn in.
And we have a newly sworn in judge.
And
Mary.
you, commissioners. Kinsley. And sorry, what did you say?
No, we had a judge that didn't quite make it to the
Oh,
swearing in,
yes,
but
yes.
Judge Wiles was going to swear in
Judge Kaufman Noble.
Judge Kaufman Noble right before her 8:30 docket.
I don't think I have any further announcements.
I want
Yes,
to thank our staff, so Nicole and Carolina and Ken and everybody who got the reception set up for us after the swearing in, and it was quite hectic in here. But
Yes,
thank you
it was.
for the hospitality.
Thank
They did a
you.
wonderful job. They got here really, really early on a very foggy, cold morning.
Absolutely. Any announcements?
Nope.
Nope. Christian, Ken? No, okay. Well, I think that covers our agenda for today. There's nothing else for the good of the order. I will adjourn the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners meeting, formal meeting for January 5th, 2023. It is 11:26. Thank you. 2023. I gotta keep saying
Wow.
that.
And next week is January